How were you pictured then? Were you ever under attack as a result of the role that you played?
Oh yes, people threatened to kill me. Uh, there were a lot of people making trouble for the law firm. I really had to resign from the law firm. They were very fair to me. In fact, they paid me my salary for a year after that.
But
and
you had to resign from the
I
firm.
resigned from the firm. And you see, we won that election in November of '62. The same day George Wallace was first elected governor of Alabama, the people of Birmingham voted to take a new course. And then I was one of a group that went to Boutwell and asked him to run. He was the outgoing lieutenant governor, a member of my church, and a very good man. But he was part of the culture that we had. And he had sponsored an amendment to the Constitution to freedom of choice on schools. But he agreed we had to change. And Tom King ran. Tom had run the year before. In fact, the Freedom Rider thing happened in the middle of the mayor's race in '61. And although Tom had led the first, he came in second in the runoff, and Haynes was elected.
At the same time,
Tom ran, and then Connor. When I went out, I ran around like a big. We had 8 speakers. I was one of them, and we went around with charts, running like a civics class, talking about here's this form of government, here's how it works, and here's this form. And in the commission government, there's no checks and balances. The same people pass the taxes, spend the money. Over here, you got a council and a mayor, and the council passes the laws, and the mayor administers the laws.
Did you go to any black communities doing that?
No, look, I stayed away. I didn't even dare call a black person on the telephone because I was sure my telephone was tapped.
So then these 8 individuals never really went out to the black community to get in.
As a matter of fact, we were trying to stay as far. That's what Connor wanted to do was.
Don't associate.
Well, for instance, the first thing I did after it was clear we were going to have a thing, and I was in charge of running the campaign. I sent an ad man to both television stations to buy television time. I wanted a half hour of television the night before the election. Both stations refused to sell me television time. They said changing the city government is not a matter of sufficient public importance to justify the opening of television time. And yet about a week later, they both decided it was important enough for them to do a documentary. Well, the election had to be a 3-way election, mayor, council, commission, or city manager, with a runoff between the top 2. And the commission's ace in the hole was to get enough people to vote for the manager government to have a runoff. And that was our worst enemy. And there was nobody in town campaigning for the mayor, for the city manager. And both television stations hired a political science professor, one from Montevallo and the other from the University of Alabama, to come in and talk for 10 minutes on how great the city manager government was. And at that time, most political science people thought the city manager government was the best form of government. And it is a good form of government for smaller cities, but large cities, it never really worked that well.
What was their motivation in having people to come in to talk about the manager, city manager, the former?
Well, I think, I don't know, but I know I didn't like it because I wanted to win without a runoff, and if enough people voted city manager, that would force a runoff. And in those days, in politics, for the runoff, you ran ads in the paper showing how the black people had voted at Legion Field, how the black people had voted at the municipal auditorium, and scare all the white folks, and you win the election. It was the opposite of the bloody shirt in Ohio, but it was a bloody shirt. And most people thought that if we had to have a runoff, we would lose. So, but it turned out that we won without a runoff. by about 2 votes in each box. If 2 people had voted the other way in each box in Birmingham, we would have lost. It was nip and tuck. Yep. And then Connor, who had said, when I would go out speaking, I'd say, if you like Mr. Connor, elect him mayor, but we need a new form of government. And he would, of course say, no, I'll never run for mayor. I'll never run for mayor. And of course, he immediately did run for mayor. And there was a runoff. But the runoff didn't help them because the black voters had voted for Tom King. And Boutwell had a few black votes, but not a lot. And Connor had none. And so when they were in the runoff together, they were unable to use the traditional bloody shirt politics to beat Boutwell. And Boutwell ended up winning very handily in the runoff. Yeah. I think the SCLC was having a national meeting here.
That's right.
And they didn't want to interfere with what we were doing. They thought voting Connor out was a pretty good thing. Business people were having meetings. I had one meeting they invited me to at the Church of the Advent. That was the first time I met Shuttlesworth. Shuttlesworth came in the room and he said, oh, that's David Vann. I've been wanting to meet him because he read about me in the newspaper. And they nearly had some things put together, but Connor's group sent word from City Hall that if you take those signs down, you're going to jail, and we'll run a picture of Mr. Pazitz himself behind bars in the city jail.
Talking about the colored and white signs?
They were talking about taking down the colored and white signs. And so it was really pretty obvious that to make any rational resolution of our problem, Connor had to go. And remarkably, I know I had people that were my friends in the business community call me and say, David, you know you can't win this thing. Please be ready to protect it. No, be careful what you say. And
how did you view SCLC coming into town at the time?
Let me say, I was so busy doing what I was doing, I didn't worry about it. Now, Smyer and his committee did worry about it. They met with some of them, I think, and they sort of talked it out and decided that they would be careful not to try to interfere with the political. Black people got tired of being kicked around for the politics, I'm sure.
There were efforts by the movement to have meetings with this, I don't know whether it's the senior citizens at the time.
Yes, they did, and there were some meetings.
In the initial stages, though, was it true that the businessmen refused to meet with Shuttlesworth?
Well, let me say, yeah, I think they refused. People were. Shuttlesworth had a firebrand, and he no longer lived in Birmingham. He lived in Cincinnati. And that sort of gave people, see, we'll talk with the local leaders, but we can't talk with you. You're from Cincinnati. But I know I attended one meeting with the businessmen that Shuttlesworth was president at. But Fred was always eager to stir things up. And I've told him, I said, Birmingham thought you were in a trap.
Well, he was always eager to do what?
To
stir something
to get something in the paper.
Oh, okay.
And we've always said, he could call Bull Connor and say, Bull, I'm going to get on the bus at 2nd Avenue and 19th Street at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And Connor come arrest him. And there's a newspaper story. It made Shuttlesworth a hero with his followers. It made Connor a hero with his followers. What's a poor city going to do when it's trapped in that kind of thing? But anyway, Barney Monahan was the president of Vulcan Materials. I know he headed up a group, and they actually had some near agreement on some things. And I've heard that said, that they backed out, they agreed to do it and then backed out. But they backed out because the city government threatened to use all the force it had to prevent it from happening and to arrest the businessmen.